Ready?
Yeah. Hello and welcome back to the Eastman Sport Report, your father-son coach-player podcast of NorCal Sports. I'm your host, one of your hosts, Maxwell Eastman, joined by my co-host, Steven Eastman.
Hey, Max, how you doing there?
And today we have a special guest, Brian Kiley.
Hi, guys. Happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Yes, our local resident Kings fan.
I'm the only one.
Yeah, he's
the
only
resident Kings fan.
I know,
in Northern California.
There's only one,
Yeah.
He goes to the games and he's all 17,000 people right there.
Yeah, that's it.
Loading
That's
machines
it.
are crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He enters that thing turnstile 70,000
I
times
sure
every day.
do. Yep.
Yes, okay.
Mm-hmm. So, this episode is our season review of the Kings' regular season, and I guess you could say postseason, because
They had postseason games, just not playoff games.
you're not wrong.
Yeah, okay.
So, as you said before the podcast, you have some stuff you want to talk about, so why don't you start it off?
Okay, so I want to start off with what's their best part of the season. My best part of the season is this is the 10th time since the Sacramento Kings have been in Sacramento that we had above 500 record. From the aspect of what we're in 30th season, and this is now the 100th season of Kings basketball, or 100 years of royalty, which I do have to say those videos that they made at the beginning of the season and they played throughout, those were some really good promo videos. Did you like those promo videos, like the 100 years old there, Brian?
Oh, yeah. No, it's fun to kind of reflect on the history, and it's wild to think about in a league with the Knicks and the Celtics and the Lakers and all of these iconic franchises. I'm pretty sure the Kings have been around for longer than all of them, which is amazing.
Yeah, and they're from the Rochester area.
Yeah.
Shout out to our Eastman heritage. From the 1850s, I think our Eastman heritage can be traced back to Rochester. So there you go. I have no idea when we left and we did, but anyway. Rochester Royals and the Kings had to follow us across country, I guess, the Eastman clan, right? Okay.
Supposedly.
So it's also crazy to think about that 46 wins does not get you in the playoffs. Like, that's just crazy if you think back in the overall grand scheme of things of 46 wins after last year getting 48, and you get the third seed, and the 46 gets you the ninth seed, and you don't even get in the playoffs.
That's my one thing that I want to talk about. I don't know if there's going to be a better time to bring it up, but
Go ahead.
I think the Kings overachieved this season because of how good the West is this season. We ourselves, as Kings fans, had such high expectations, thinking that we might stay in the third seed or at least go down to the sixth seed, is what a lot of us said before the season started. But looking at how good the West is and how if the Kings had the same record that they have now, they would be tied for the 8th seed with the Miami Heat instead of down in the 9th seed.
For the Eastern Conference?
For the Eastern Conference.
Mm-hmm.
And how there are 5 teams with 50 or more wins in the Western Conference. So having 46 wins, that's 4 below 5th place. That's pretty respectable. And in a different season, that would probably give us the 7th seed. It's not this season.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, I think the Kings overachieved because of how difficult the league became this year, especially in the West.
Well, I'd actually say I disagree with that a little bit, whether they underachieved or overachieved. I actually think they kind of a little bit underachieved. At the beginning of the season, I was saying 51 wins. Now, when we started this podcast, I kind of went down and said we're getting about 49. I don't know if, Brian, if you had any predictions at the beginning of the season of how good you think the Kings would do.
Well, I thought this was going to be a season that really revealed a lot about the Kings, and specifically was last season kind of a flash in the pan, or is there some sense of sustainability? And I really went into the season, I remember saying to different people, who's going to win 55 games in the NBA this year? And the reason for asking that question was there are so many good teams that wins are going to be really, really hard to come by. And you look at the final standings, Boston blew everyone out of the water. But then even in the West, you've got, 57 wins won the conference, if I'm not mistaken. And to your point, Max, there were so many other good teams. So on some level, 46 wins is solid. 46 wins gets you in the playoffs most years. Now, the challenging part of this season, of course, there were 2 elements. Number one, just mind-boggling inconsistency.
Oh, totally.
And then number two, this is certainly fresh in all of our minds, just not coming through in key moments. The month of April was a disaster, right?
Yeah. I think this was the season of highs and lows and large swings. Last year it was very consistent, and their offense drove him. This year was a transition of, okay, hey, we can't just be the highest scoring team in the league. We need to start introducing defense. And by the end of the season, they were doing that, but they were sacrificing offense. And the end of the season, I really think what you said, they really missed Malik Monk at the end of the season. Kevin Huerter, I think they missed, but I think they missed Malik Monk way more. And that was a huge factor for their record for the last, 9 to 10 games.
That's absolutely right. And nothing against Kevin Huerter, but his skill set is more easily replaceable by the other guys they have on their roster. It was a huge bummer that he got hurt, but if we're going to talk about what really affected the product on the floor, a Malik Monk style player, you didn't have somebody else you could plug in there. Whereas from the starting standpoint, I mean, I think Keon Ellis did an admirable job and was not a huge downgrade from Kevin Huerter, which is, again, not to say anything negative about Huerter. It's just to say something good about Ellis. And who knows what would have happened had Malik been in the lineup. Now, the counterpoint to that is the Kings blew plenty of games with Malik in the lineup. Yeah. So certainly there were, I mean, you look across the course of this season, one example that comes to mind is we play Indiana at home right after the Siakam trade. I think I was at that game. And they have no Siakam, no Halliburton. I was at that game. And we lose. And then we play them on the road at full strength. Siakam and Halliburton are playing, and we win. You're just like, make it make sense.
Yeah, how many games did they have this year where the other team was missing star players and we go lose?
Oh, it became a joke between my son and I about Kawhi's out tonight. Oh, guess we're going to lose by 30.
Exactly. This was the year of inconsistency. We lost to the Detroit Pistons. We lost to the Washington Wizards. We lost to the Charlotte Hornets. We went 0-3 against the Houston Rockets.
0-6 against the Pelicans.
Yeah, 0-6 against the Pelicans.
Take away those two teams, we're a great team.
I know, yeah.
But one thing that's interesting is I think every sports fan gets mad at their team for blowing leads, but it is a remarkable thing in the NBA. I joke that in the NBA, a 20-point first-half lead and $5 will get you a cup of coffee. It just is almost meaningless. These massive shifts in scoring from one half to another, from one quarter to another, really made for, I don't know, it was very entertaining in some ways, but also very frustrating because you're going like just recently we had Oklahoma City. We were up by 21 in that game? And just I don't even want to watch the rest of this game because I know what's going to happen. And sure enough.
I think that was in Oklahoma City toward the end of the season, and we had this big lead in the second quarter, if I remember correctly, and then they just slowly kept going away. And that was the one where it's SGA kind of took over in the fourth period. And I think you're really starting to see why they're winning in the playoffs and why they did so good.
Yep.
Why SGA really just took over for that young team and really helped them out. Back to the Kings, though. If you jump back to the beginning of the season, some of the things I remember from the beginning of the season was we seemed to play the Warriors every other game.
I think it was
because you come off the playoff loss last year, and then we played them 2 to 3 times in the preseason, and then it seemed 3 out of the first 10 games were the Warriors games.
Yeah,
that was crazy.
Yeah, some great matchups in those games, right?
Super fun games.
Opening night was less fun. I was at that one, but you look at the time we played them at home in the in-season tournament. That was pretty epic. Malik just threw up that prayer that got answered.
Yeah, off the glass, I think it was.
And then there was the heartbreaker in Golden State before that, I think, where Thompson elevated over Mitchell at the very end.
I think that was one of the ones where should have got called back or something like that. But
do we talk about somewhat the Kings of the 2-minute report just for a little bit?
Sure.
I don't know how many times it happened, how many times we got screwed over, you could say, by the refs. It was more prevalent and more it was more prevalent, and maybe you pay attention to it more because they're more important games at the end of the season. But it just seemed that the refs swallow their whistle for a lot of things. Maybe part of it is because after the All-Star break, whatever Adam Silver had them doing, I don't know what that talk was about. I kind of want to hear it because I think, I forget exactly what game it was, but there was one game where the Boston Celtics shot 0 free throws. I forget who it is against, but they still ended up winning that game because they're the Celtics and they're really good. But that is crazy. That's the first time in, I think, like 50-ish years that there's been a game where one team doesn't shoot any free throws.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And back to the Kings on that, is the Kings being screwed by the refs part of what Adam Silver said and the refs swallowing their whistle on a lot of calls now? Or is it them just looking at our jersey and saying, oh, it's the Kings, you can't let the Kings win?
I think it's an unconscious disrespect. I don't think they consciously say it's Kings and we're not going to give them a call. But they don't respect you like LeBron James and Steph Curry. Like, they don't. There's no way around that. Let's move to something else here, something that was new this season. I want to get your guys' thoughts. What's your thoughts now looking back at the in-season tournament at the beginning of the season? Max, you want to go first? What was your thoughts on the in-season tournament?
Before the season, I said very passionately to my dad that the in-season tournament is really, really dumb. It's going to be treated like an all-star game where no one cares and it's just going to be a bunch of offense, which is kind of true because of the point differential. But the stars aren't going to play because it's going to be meaningless games at the end of it. Because if you're going to the Hall of Fame and you have an in-season tournament championship, that doesn't matter. You're not the world champions. You won an in-season tournament. That doesn't matter yet, anyway. Maybe it'll matter in the future. But who cares about what happens in those 4 to 5 games in the regular season when, let's say, you're the Dallas Mavericks who go and win 7 of their last 10 and go up to the 5th seed and are now, I think, up 2-1 against the Clippers. And we're looking, as I say, the hottest team in the league right now. They didn't make the in-season tournament. So does that matter for playoff success? And do people look back? I don't think a single person has looked back at the in-season tournament and went, wow, the Lakers had a heck of a run, man.
I do think the Pacers, you could give the Pacers credit on that. Before I give my thoughts, Brian, what's your thoughts on the in-season tournament?
I loved it. I thought it was great. I think, skeptical about it, as a lot of people were. But I love the idea of giving early season games a little more emphasis.
I agree.
On some level, like, let's hope that players care all the time. But even as a fan, I found myself paying a little more attention to games during that time. I found the conclusions of some of the games to be interesting. Now, there are little tweaks they need to do with some of the point differential stuff, caused some games to get a little silly where there's like a 20-point game at the end of one game and they're still keeping their starters out there because of point differential issues.
Yeah, and like the Kings even scored a layup with like 2 seconds to go and they're up by like 10 or 15.
Exactly.
You know, and so you're like, that seems like unsportsmanship, but that's what the tournament makes you do.
Right.
Anyway.
So there are some little tweaks here and there that need to be done. But we attended, it was one of the, I think maybe the only game my whole family of 4 went to was the in-season tournament game against Oklahoma City. We were missing Fox and still managed to beat them by about 7. That was still, watching SGA in that game, by the way, was just, he is incredible. But I just loved the kind of a little additional energy, little extra juice to some of these games. And on some level, you're right, Max. Like, no one's looking back going like, wow, how about that in-season championship for the Lakers? But you know what? In the moment, it was fun.
Yeah, well, I think it probably did bring an excitement, and I think there's so many times where teams start hot and then they fade, and you get nothing.
Yeah, no, that's true.
And so you're like, hey, okay, if you start hot, there's something to start to play for at the beginning that you can't actually get. So you're like, yeah, the Kings made it to the out of their play-in or tournament group play. Go ahead, Max.
One last thing I want to say about the in-season tournament. I do agree with Brian, and it's like, it was really fun. Like, I didn't expect it to be that good. Like, it was kind of a playoff atmosphere because all the fans felt that it was actually something to play for. But one thing that I think they should transfer from the in-season tournament to the playoffs is the special courts that they had.
Ooh,
not necessarily the exact layouts, because I think they're kind of, some of them were bad. But I like the idea of, like,
that idea could use some more work.
Yeah,
like, okay, I'm with you in theory.
Yeah.
I don't know about this execution.
Yeah,
though.
but like, if you look at March Madness and you see like the blue borders around it all, and that's March Madness, and the NBA doesn't have stuff like that. They used to have the giant Larry O'Brien trophy in the middle next to the logos.
Yeah,
but we need to have something like that again. It's like, this is the playoffs and this is what it looks like.
I was going to ask you guys about what you thought about the courts. I think some courts were better than others. I think some courts were really it was nice from the aspect of if you turned on a game, oh, hey, it's an in-season tournament game, you saw the difference in the courts. Like, that was nice, but some courts made it really hard to see the game.
You're just like,
really hard to see the ball. When the court got too dark, it was really hard to see the ball and the players sometimes.
Yeah,
so,
the red and the green courts were a little rough.
Yeah. I think the Kings court with a gray and a blue actually worked.
Yeah,
it was one of the few that worked.
I remember at the beginning of the season, we were talking, he's like, there were rumors that it was going to be a red court, and the Kings shot it down because they're like, no, just no.
No, not red. Yeah. So, yeah, I think that, anyway, is there anything that you guys would if Steven Stern was listening, or not David Stern, he's not listening because, Adam Silver, any ideas for change? What would you like to see difference about the
I mean, I'd have to refresh myself on some of the rules, but I think you want to avoid, again, the situations like I'm referring to earlier where teams are having to do kind of stuff that's not really natural to the game. I'm not really sure what would be a better tiebreaker than point differential. Yeah. I also think if there is a way to make it a little bit more geographically focused, I think to play teams kind of, you're playing the teams on the West Coast or the East Coast or whatever. Now, the flip side of that, of course, is it makes it a little harder to have groups with some parity.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think it's a great, hey, year one, it went great. What do you think?
I think it went great. I do think the interesting thing, the biggest tweak that I would make is easily courts. Make sure you can make it more seeable. And then the other thing is 4 games enough to come out of group play? Because, like, it's only 4 games to get out of group play and to go into the rest of it. I like how they did it where they grouped them together as in like 3. Kings were in the group of 3, 6, 9. What did that make it? 12 and 15. I think that makes sense from how they split up the groups for it's somewhat different. But I also like, is 4 games enough? Do you need to make it like 6? But then you'd have to make it like 8 if you play everybody twice. So that seems like a lot to make it through November. But anyway, that's my biggest thing was it seemed like there's only 4 games to get into the tournament, and if you have a bad shooting night, which I guess is their point, but anyway, that'd be my thought. Any thoughts of what we would change, Max?
I think you guys covered all the bases.
Okay,
my main thing is make the courts better because some of them were really rough. I think the Pelicans specifically with the like black and green, it's a choice. I do have to say, I think the contrast. I could say a lot more stuff because I like graphic design and stuff like that, but I'm not going to get into all that right now.
Okay, so if we transition to player review and think about how the players did this year, I'll start off with Keegan Murray. Keegan Murray did grow. He grew his defense. I was not expecting his defense to be that good. His defense was way better than expecting, where he was usually guarding one of their best wings. So that's amazing. He did do more variety of shots. His scoring average went up a little bit. The interesting thing is his 3-point shooting. He was 41% last year, and this year he shot 35.8. So he went down a little over 5% percentage points in makes. Last year, he made over 200 threes. Remember when he broke the record for threes in a season? Mm-hmm. He only made 183 this year, but he shot about the same amount of attempts from 3. So he shot 511 from 3 this year, 501 last year. So almost exact same amount of threes, but he made less because he shot less percentage. Now, is that because he's working more harder on defense or he's doing other shots? But either way, overall, I think he grew. I think I could still love to see more out of Keegan on the offensive side. The other thing I did say about Keegan is the Keegan Murray chant in the arena is probably one of the best chants in the NBA.
Yeah, it's a good one.
That is a good one.
It's so fun. Sometimes when we're watching, me and Stephen are watching the game, we do it ourselves.
At home. Yes.
Brian, you were at the Keegan Murray 11 straight 3-pointer game.
Oh, my gosh.
47 points for Keegan Murray.
Goodness gracious. That was one of the most incredible sports environments I've ever witnessed. And in terms of an individual performance, I've just never seen anything like it. I remember my wife and I were at the game, and he makes 1, great. He makes 2, cool. 3, 4. And you guys know how it is. You guys are fans. You see a guy make a couple shots, and then you're like, okay, there's going to be some kind of heat check. He'll miss, and then we'll sort of move on. And every single one kind of felt like that. Like, there's just no way. There's just no way. And they kept going in. And of course, people are just losing their minds. And it was obviously historic, something that's only happened a very small handful of times in the history of the game. And even I'm blanking on what exactly there was in terms of records, but I think there was at least one like all-time record he set. But regardless, it was a phenomenal thing to witness.
He made 11 in a row and 12 in a row?
11 in a row, 12 total.
Which is just crazy to think about.
Yeah.
I mean, there's sometimes in a game the whole team makes over 12. It doesn't even make 12.
Right. And to do that in one quarter was pretty historic. And I don't think it's quite right to be like, well, hey, look, that is the potential of Keegan Murray. Like on some level, sure, but that's such an extreme outlier.
There are some random Pistons players that are going to get 50-point bombs for no reason.
Yeah, but I do think it highlights. Obviously, he's an extremely capable shooter. I think he's getting better at coming off dribble handoffs, and he kind of has his move where he'll sort of juke to the left and come back to the right. I don't know what you guys' thoughts are on kind of his future. I really think he's at the point now where is he just going to become this kind of 3-and-D guy, or can he be a legitimate star? I still think he needs to do more without the ball in his hands. I think he needs to get more aggressive. He got better this year, but he needs to be more aggressive in attacking the basket. And, I think a lot of the Kings' success moving forward is going to be, can he make that leap?
And totally. If he makes that leap, that's going to make it so much better in the Kings. I've heard this comparison of him being like a Chris Middleton. I think is the best comparison of can he get to that level.
Yeah, no, that's
where
good.
Middleton's been injured for a while, so you kind of missed that. But back when they won the championship a couple of years ago, I mean, he was up there with Giannis, keeping up with Giannis, their second leading scorer. Just dynamite. And I think if Keegan can get to that, like I think that's his goal. That should be his goal of what he wants to get to.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's see here. What else do you want to go here? Sabonis. One thing about him is his consistency is crazy. I mean, what was the streak? He had
61
double-doubles. He had 77 out of 82 games.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
That is crazy consistency. When you talk about the Kings being inconsistent all season, you could pencil in Sabonis for a double-double on almost every night. That is
at some point, I feel like you would lose money if you betted him to have a double-double.
Yeah, but you didn't. No, you probably would have won a whole bunch of money.
I don't know I'm not a gambler. I don't know who's taking action on Sabonis will not have a double-double tonight. But yes, I don't think your odds would have been great on that one.
The interesting thing, another one I want to point out about, is we talk about the beginning of the season. Herder's season was weird.
Yeah.
Because he started the season, even in preseason, where Coach Brown was playing with Chris Duarte as a starter. I think that totally messed up Herder's confidence. I totally think he messed up Herder's confidence with that. And then he started the season. He was still starting, but he didn't play very good. He might have done like one or two games even in the regular season with Duarte, and that didn't do any good. You put Herder back in, and it was kind of this precursor to foretelling of Keon Ellis. If somebody like Duarte, or like they've been searching, they got Kessler Edwards, and they said to somebody else like, okay, we need somebody who can play defense on the wings, who can also shoot threes. That's what we need in this position. And with Keegan Murray getting better at scoring and Malik Monk's being better at scoring off the bench, Herder's scoring was less important. Now, he still makes the gravity of him on the court of pulling the defense away. Or if you look at the end of the season, when Keon Ellis is playing the Herder role, they go under on Keon Ellis so much.
Yeah.
So he gets way more open threes than Kevin Herder ever did. But then that's why Keon Ellis actually shot over 40% for the last 2 months. But anyway, Kevin Herder, like, he even admitted it was like one of his worst seasons ever. Like his shooting percentage, like he's supposed to be a shooter, he shot 36% from three. Like that is
like league average.
Yeah, and if you're supposed to be this awesome shooter, that's not where you want to go.
Well, he was such a big part of the Kings' success last year.
Oh yeah,
he obviously came over from Atlanta and made a huge difference. And the challenge of Herder is if he's not scoring, he's not really doing a whole lot else for you. He's not really a facilitator. He can get a couple of rebounds here and there. He is an average at best defender.
He's not bad, but he's not great.
Yeah, he's not somebody who's going to...
He's not a Trae Young who has a 0, I think, defensive rating.
Yeah, not that. But yeah, I'm not trying to dog the guy. But he's not somebody who like, yeah, let's put them on the other team's best perimeter player. So he's a guy that shoots and he can score. And he really struggled to do that this year. And when you're a shooter, kind of you could say this about the whole Kings team, but you live by the 3 and you die by the 3. And this year, Herter just didn't have it for long stretches. But I think it's kind of emblematic of kind of struggles at that position in general. I mean, Keon Ellis did some good things for us down the stretch. But, I mean, gosh, that 2-3 position, a lot of inconsistency the entire season.
Interesting looking at it. So it's not only is the 3-point percentage went down from 40 to 36, which is not huge, but it still is big in the aspect that he made or he shot, I didn't write down the notes of how much he made, but last year he shot 510 3-pointers and made 40% of them. Like that's amazing. This year he only shot 341 and he made less percentage. So, I mean, that's a huge difference of made 3-pointers. I didn't write that down what he did, but that is so much huge difference.
Well, and I'd be curious to see, I don't have it right in front of me, but just even in terms of his minutes, he had such a reduction in even just attempts, let alone makes. Mm-hmm. But I have to assume that is at least somewhat reflective of a pretty significant reduction in minutes.
Yeah, and that might have been at the end of the season was Keon Ellis, but it also might be he doesn't come back in after this first quarter stint because of Malik Monk. Yeah. Is probably a big part of it. And then toward the end of the season, Davion was actually starting to hit.
Yeah.
If you move over to Davion, he started the season in the tank. He was worse than he was in the Warriors playoff series where he was not doing very good. And he worked himself back into the lineup.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which credit to him for that. But I just pulled it up. Herter averaged 29.4 his first season in Sacramento, 24.4 this year. So that doesn't sound like a lot, but that's 5 out of 30. That's 16%, 17%. So but you're right about Davion. He was he was in the doghouse to start the year.
Almost
but
unplayable.
Did some really good things.
Yeah, almost unplayable.
He was unplayable. He was, dare I say, garbage.
Disappointments for this season for player wise, I would say Duarte. I was expecting more to Duarte, and it's Sasha. He was supposed to be this EuroLeague MVP. I think he realized how athletic the NBA is versus Europe, and I think he'll do better in his second season, but he still was a disappointment to me.
More athletic in the way of pace, right?
Yeah, and how much he has to do defensively, because I think we talked about this in the podcast recently about how Sasha, after he was injured, when he came back, I think he played way better than he did at the beginning of the season, because he able to get out there and learn, or did it. He sat back and learned because he's a smart player. But then watching him play defense better, getting in the passing lanes and understanding other things of how to get open and where to do things, play defense-wise in the NBA, it took him some learning curve. And you kind of forget that. It's a totally different league and way different rules and way different athletic players. So.
Yeah, and I am not terribly optimistic on Sasha moving forward. We'll see. I'm rooting for the guy, obviously, and I cannot presume to understand what it's like to move halfway around the world for your job and to be expected to perform at a high level. But the shooting was kind of hit or miss.
Yeah.
And
which was much supposed to be a strong suit.
Yeah, and much like Herter, was he giving you much else when he wasn't shooting? And I would say, no, not really.
His second stint when he came back from injury, I thought he was doing more. He was getting more rebounds. I think he's never going to be a great defender, but he was actually playing the passings a little bit better. I think he was doing better. So I think he has a 3-year contract with us. I could see if he does not drastically improve next year, I don't know if his third year is an option. He might just go back to Europe after 2 years if it doesn't work out.
Yeah.
I could totally see that. Now, I think he's going to get better next year. I hope he gets better next year. But yes.
And he missed, what? It was 6 weeks or 8 weeks with that ankle. That's, I don't know. That's tough to come back from.
Yeah. One other player that I thought was really good. So the two players I thought were really good that were kind of shocking, I guess, in some way, was Keon Ellis.
Of course.
Which we could go on for a long time with Keon Ellis. But the other one I was kind of surprised with, Alex Len really took over. They signed JaVale McGee for the backup center spot, and they kind of went back and forth with McGee, Len. And Len just showed that he was better. And I think that if you watched Alex Len, because he's been on the Kings for a while, he was not very athletic. And I would say last season, he was just a big dude. And I would say last season he really turned into whatever he did, his defense improved from being able to get on the switches, to be able to stay on the court. I give the guy credit. He's a big guy, huge body, and he got quicker feet and more athletic.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think he was really solid,
went from
especially towards the end of the year.
He just went from some 7-foot guy to actually a slasher, kind of.
Yeah, and he actually got better at the ball handling. Like, because when you come in as Sabonis, they kind of want you to run Sabonis. He's never going to be as good as Sabonis, but he was out there and he did a serviceable job.
Yeah, and he got a couple of defensive player of the game nods. So,
yeah. So he was doing pretty good there. Any other highlights for the season before we kind of look toward the next season? Any other highlights that you guys want to point out for the season?
In the midst of the frustration of it all, they had a few great wins. I think specifically of 2 wins against Oklahoma City, one of which I already mentioned, and then they had another one as well. They swept the Lakers, which is never a bad thing to sweep the Lakers. They had, I just think about even in games that I attended, and I attended many games that I left the arena wishing I had not attended that particular evening.
That's why we brought Brian, because he goes, we were coaching and playing.
That's right. You guys were actually doing something useful. Yes. I was just spending my money to be frustrated. But I think about they played Orlando in a game that went into double overtime. And it was one of those games that you felt like it shouldn't have. And I forget, but I feel like back then Orlando's record wasn't quite as good. I think they kind of went on a bit of a run later in the season. This particular game, I remember my wife and I, we had upgraded our seats, so we were sitting pretty close behind the basket, which was fun. And to see Paolo Banchero, who is just a beast. That guy is so good. And them and the Kings battle it out, go into double overtime. They squeak out the win at the very end. That was a fun one. So I try to remember as I get frustrated by some of these games, like, hey, there were a lot of fun ones along the way too.
Yeah. Do you have any highlights that you want to point out there, Max?
I don't think specifically. I more like the evolution of Keon Ellis, because it feels like we finally have our shooting guard, in my opinion. And he's really cheap as well.
Well, I think his I heard somebody else say this. The postseason game, play-in tournament game, when he beat the Warriors, he went up to the whiteboard and wrote in permanent pen as the starting shooting guard spot. Like he said, like there was a question I think up to that point, and when he showed up in that important game, he went up in Sharpie and says, "I'm your shooting guard next year."
So what did we do after the goose egg in the following game? I'm a Keon fan, but
I know.
I am less confident than the two of you that he is our solution at shooting guard. I would love for him to be. But
I think that gets to do as we look toward next season.
Yeah.
If you leave Keon Ellis in there, I think you have to upgrade the Harrison Barnes starting spot. Is if you look forward, if the Kings want to make a push into the top 4, let's say, of the West, you need a better power forward. If Keegan's going to be your small forward, which I think there was a question whether he's a 3 or a 4. I think he's more of a 3, but he can play both. You need a better 4. So I had some thoughts on it. I'll throw out some names here. If you had a choice, would you much rather trade for Kyle Kuzma, Lauri Markkanen, or Jeremy Grant?
Me personally, I've been saying this for a while. Lauri Markkanen is a great guy. He's the perfect supporting star because he's really good on the Jazz, but the Jazz are a really bad team. So him being their best player on a bad team shows how he can do a lot more on a good team. So I think if he was on the Kings and he was able to run a rotation with Fox, Ellis, Murray, and Sabonis, that would open up a lot of things because then you could give more minutes to people like Monk and less minutes to people like Murray and Sabonis because Lauri Markkanen could be that sort of big guy defender or taller guy because he's a great scorer from the mid-range and inside, kind of average from three-point range. I'd say he's about same skill level as De'Aaron Fox, three-point range.
Markkanen?
Yeah. Which is above average.
But as a tall guy, that's really good, though. Yeah.
So I think he would be the perfect guy for the Kings if I could trade him for Herter and Barnes. I would do it for a heartbeat. I'd give them a first-round pick as well if I was Monte McNair, just so then I can persuade them even more. I think that the Kings should look for someone like Lauri Markkanen.
What's your thought? Yeah, or anybody else that you like throwing? That's
sure. I mean, any of those guys would be great. I like. Jeremy Grant. I think he's a little more well-rounded player. I like Markkanen. Like, I think he's great. I enjoy watching him. He's one of my favorite players to play with on 2K. I am less convinced that he would be a great fit for the Kings, just because I think there's a bit of overlap in terms of his skill set relative to some other players that we have. Again, I would take any of those guys. I think that we could use the kind of the all-around game and kind of the under-the-basket toughness of a Jeremy Grant. It feels like Kyle Kuzma has been talked about so much that if it was going to happen, it would have happened by now. And I don't know. So maybe it still will. But I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Kyle Kuzma is a distant third out of the three, but those are the three names that come up the most for the Kings. If it was last offseason, I was so much in the Jeremy Grant camp. I wanted them to re-sign him instead of re-signing Harrison Barnes. I was go after Jeremy Grant as much as you can. I totally agree with him. He's exactly what the Kings need. He can shoot. He's the toughness, athletic guy. If you look at the who'd we go 0-6 against this year?
The Pelicans.
Okay, who's going to guard Zion Williamson?
Yeah.
Not
Harrison Barnes, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, but
sorry, Harrison, you're great, but
he's a great guy, and he has some good. Has his role in the team. But I think Jeremy Grant's what you need if you're going to guard even like the Houston Rockets. We were technically 0-3 against Houston Rockets. They're a long, athletic team.
Yeah.
I think Jeremy Grant's the guy that you're missing. Now, I would love Jeremy Grant or Markkanen. Kyle Kuzma, I'm actually not sure if I'd want him. I'd probably actually like Harrison Barnes more than Kyle Kuzma, or they're about equal to me. Because I think Kyle Kuzma
I don't know if it's just because
hunts shots instead of hunting shots in the offense.
I don't know if it's just because he's on the Wizards and the Wizards are badly coached and stuff. And Jordan Poole he's a player. I'll say that much about him. I don't know if he has a bad situation around him, which makes him look worse than he did when he was on the Lakers. But I'm not a big fan of Kyle Kuzma just in general. I think he's not a good player. He would be on the bench for the Kings for me.
Kyle Kuzma?
Yeah,
that's where it's like I'd much rather have Harrison Barnes over Kyle Kuzma. But I would take Jeremy Grant or Markkanen over Harrison Barnes.
One big name that I want to put out there is a lot of people are saying is if the Clippers don't work out this year, they probably are going to try to look to rebuild. So would you trade for Paul George?
Depends on what you give up.
Yeah, that totally depends on asking price. I don't know how old Paul George is, but that dude's got a lot of miles on the tires. And
he's still playing at an all-star level, though.
He's playing I like Paul George a lot. Obviously, he would be a huge upgrade for us at most positions.
If you could get him for Harrison Barnes and maybe
Kevin
something
Huerter.
else, but I would not give up Keegan Murray for the guy.
Well, I mean, I think there's also the question of, okay, what do the Clippers want? I don't think for the Clippers to trade George, they're going to want something to restock the cupboard, which is going to be picks and young players.
And
I don't know if we have a whole lot to offer them in that department.
Exactly.
I think Monte needs to really look to. This is the year that showed Monte that this specific team needs to be stronger. We can't wait for someone to evolve into a star. I'd love Keegan or Keon to be our third star, but I feel like they need one. I feel like they're not going to be that third star next year, maybe the year after that. But if we want to actually contend with Fox in his prime and Sabonis in his prime, we need to have serious. Monte needs to have serious conversations about looking to expand this team into something better. And
I think they will. I kind of understood why they rolled it back, I guess you'd say. Mm-hmm. Brought most of the team back this year. But, let's see. It'll be a very fun, interesting offseason because I totally agree with all three of us are saying that the Kings are going to make some moves. They totally are. There's no way they're bringing back the same team next year. If they do, then Monte's not doing his job or he can't find anybody better. But he has to do something, I think, to try to get the team better. So
one thing that I saw about Monte in his first few years is that he was building a team. Because at the start of his tenure with the Kings, he was slowly building a team around Fox and moving assets and see what worked until he got Sabonis. he drafted Halliburton because Halliburton fell into our lap and went, well, we have to draft him now.
It's a blessing. That was a blessing. Yes.
Love Halliburton. Happy to see him do good on the Pacers. Anyway, and Monte was slowly building around Fox and Sabonis eventually, but slowly building around Fox until finally he saw that he can start building a team to start to contend. So we started to do that last season. We blew all expectations out of the water and went up to the 3rd seed. So now our expectations are sky high, and we show that we can win because we have won. So we need to find other ways to win.
Yeah. I don't know if you've heard this, but I use the analogy for asking Brian here. I would say that if you go back to the Kings from 20 years ago, the good team, I think Keon Ellis is your Doug Christie.
Yeah, that's a good comp.
So that's my comparison. But you need an upgrade on the 4 for Keon Ellis to be your Doug Christie. You have to have a better forwards out there.
Yeah.
To guard like the Zions.
The power forward on that team was Chris Webber.
Exactly. Right? And even if if
Yeah.
you're saying that Sabonis is your better player, he's better than Vlade, you need somebody at Vlade's level at your power forward.
Yeah, well, and I think just more broadly, our interior defense all year was not good.
Yeah.
Sabonis constantly struggled against bigger centers. We didn't really have an answer. I mean, obviously we saw it with Zion in both the well, no, he didn't play in the most recent game, but the last regular season game, Zion just ate us for lunch.
Yeah.
Valanciunas was a big problem for Sabonis. I think to your point from earlier, I'm not sure what the answer is, but we need a little more interior defensive presence from somewhere going into next year.
Well, okay, we've been going here for about 40 minutes here, and we try to keep it a little bit less than that. So thanks, everybody, for listening here. Any last parting thoughts on our kind of King season in review or thoughts for next season?
Light the beam.
Light the beam. It'll be an interesting offseason with not a lot of going on in free agency and certainly not a lot of cap space, and then kind of a weak draft class.
Yeah, but we got the 13th pick.
Monty, we'll see.
I'd actually see if can he trade the 13th pick and package that with Harrison Barnes and see what we can get. But we'll see.
Hey, we'll see. Should be fun.
Okay, thanks everybody for joining our Kings season in the review.
Thank you, Brian.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
And stay tuned next time. And actually, we're actually going to stop recording right here, but start recording our Niners